Oh my God!
A billionaire CEO was driving along a quiet railway line in Lagos when he spotted a small basket lying in the middle of the tracks. Inside were twin babies, abandoned and helpless. What happens next is a story of danger, betrayal, and courage that will shock you to your core. Don't miss life-changing stories like this hit. Subscribe and turn on notifications. Watch till the end to see how the CEO's decision changes everything. Comment below, what would you do if you found babies abandoned like this? Like this video if you believe in heroes, and share it to inspire others. The morning sun had just begun to rise over Lagos, Nigeria, painting the sky with hues of orange and gold. The busy city was waking up, but on the outskirts, along an old railway line, there was silence, an unusual silence that carried a strange weight. Inside a sleek black Mercedes-Benz, CEO Chinedu Okafor, a 40-year-old billionaire, leaned back against the leather seat. Known across Nigeria for his sharp business mind and ruthless strategies in the corporate world, he was a man who rarely slowed down. His car usually moved swiftly, but today, something unusual caught his eye. Just a few yards ahead, right in the middle of the railway track, lay a small bamboo basket. At first, Chinedu thought it was nothing, maybe just abandoned trash. Lagos was full of such random sights, and he wasn't the kind of man to pay attention to street oddities. But as the car rolled closer, a faint sound pierced through the closed windows. A sound that froze him instantly. It was the soft, desperate cry of a baby. "Stop the car!" Chinedu ordered sharply, his voice unusually tense. His driver, startled by the sudden command, pressed the brakes. The car screeched to a halt just a few feet from the railway crossing. Chinedu pushed open the door and stepped out. The early morning air was cool, but his heart was racing with a heat he hadn't felt in years. His polished shoes crunched against the gravel as he moved closer to the basket. The crying grew clearer. Bending down, he slowly lifted the lid of the basket. And what he saw made his world spin. Inside were not one, but two babies, tiny, fragile, wrapped in thin pieces of cloth. Their faces were pale, their lips dry, but their little eyes blinked up at him as they cried out for help. For the first time in years, Chinedu's cold, businesslike demeanor cracked. He felt his hands tremble as he reached out and touched their small arms. "Twins!" he whispered under his breath, disbelief shaking every word. Before he could process the shock, a loud, piercing train whistle echoed in the distance. Chinedu's head jerked up. The railway tracks beneath him began to vibrate ever so slightly. The sound grew louder, closer, fast. The babies cried louder now, as if they could sense the danger. For a split second, Chinedu froze. Billion-dollar deals, luxury boardrooms, private jets, his entire life flashed through his mind. Never in all his years had he faced a decision so raw, so urgent. And then, without another thought, he scooped the basket into his arms. Just as he staggered back from the tracks, the roaring train thundered past, blowing a gust of hot wind and dust that nearly knocked him over. The ground shook beneath his feet as the massive iron beast rushed by, its deafening sound swallowing everything in its path. When it was gone, silence returned. Dust swirled around him. His heartbeat pounded in his ears. Chinedu looked down at the basket clutched against his chest. The babies were alive. Still crying, but alive. And in that moment, the billionaire CEO realized his life had just changed forever. The sound of the train still echoed faintly in the distance, but the tracks had fallen silent again. Chinedu Okafor stood frozen, his chest heaving, dust clinging to his suit. In his arms, the basket with the twin babies felt heavier than gold, heavier than any deal he had ever made. Their tiny cries tore through his heart in a way he couldn't explain. His driver, Emmanuel, rushed toward him. "Sir, are you all right?" Emmanuel's voice trembled, his eyes wide with fear. Chinedu turned to him, clutching the basket tightly. His face, usually hard and unreadable in business meetings, was pale and shaken. "There are children inside this basket." Emmanuel gasped and leaned closer. His hands instinctively rose, as if to help, but he stopped short, stunned by the sight of the two frail infants. "God have mercy," he whispered under his breath. The babies cried louder now, their little fists waving weakly in the air. Chinedu looked around the empty stretch of tracks, the quiet bushes nearby, the emptiness of the morning. Whoever left them here was gone. A sharp pang of anger shot through his chest. Who could do such a thing? "Open the car," Chinedu ordered, his voice low but firm. Emmanuel rushed back and flung open the rear door. Chinedu carefully placed the basket on the leather seat. For a man used to handling million-dollar files, his hands now shook as he tucked the baby's thin cloth tighter around them. One of the twins let out a softer cry, the sound fragile, like a plea for life. He sat beside them, his usual composure gone. Emmanuel got into the driver's seat, still stealing nervous glances at the back. "Sir, what do we do?" Chinedu stared down at the babies, his mind racing. He had closed billion-dollar acquisitions, fought hostile takeovers, and stared down corporate rivals without blinking. But this was something no amount of business training had prepared him for. "Hospital," he finally said. "Now." The car roared to life, speeding down the dusty road. The baby's cries filled the silence, a sound both heartbreaking and strangely grounding. Chinedu kept his eyes fixed on them, as though afraid they might vanish if he looked away. For a brief second, his reflection in the car window caught his attention. He didn't see the powerful CEO, the billionaire who had built empires. Instead, he saw a man holding two helpless lives, fragile and utterly dependent on him. As they sped into the city, his phone buzzed. It was a call from his secretary, reminding him of an important meeting with foreign investors. Normally, he would have answered instantly, but this time, he hit ignore without a thought. When they reached St. Mary's Hospital, nurses rushed to the car as soon as they saw the situation. Emmanuel explained breathlessly, while Chinedu carried the basket inside himself, refusing to let anyone else touch it. The doctors immediately examined the twins. Chinedu stood outside the emergency room, his fists clenched, pacing the corridor. He wasn't a man used to waiting helplessly. His entire empire moved at his command. But right now, these babies' lives were in the hands of strangers in white coats. Minutes felt like hours. Finally, a doctor emerged, pulling down his mask. "They're alive," he said gently. "Weak, malnourished, but alive. You brought them just in time." Chinedu closed his eyes for a moment, releasing a breath he didn't know he was holding. A strange relief washed over him, mixed with a new responsibility he hadn't asked for but couldn't deny. As he looked through the glass window at the twins, lying on the small hospital beds, wrapped in fresh blankets, something shifted inside him. He had rescued them from the tracks, but a question burned in his mind. Who had put them there, and why? This was no ordinary abandonment. There was something darker, something hidden beneath the surface. And Chinedu Okafor, for the first time in years, wasn't thinking about business. He was thinking about justice. The quiet hum of machines filled the children's ward at St. Mary's Hospital. The twins lay side by side in small cribs, wrapped in clean white blankets. Their chests rose and fell with fragile breaths, their tiny fists occasionally clenching as if they were still fighting for survival. Chinedu Okafor stood near the glass window, his arms folded tightly. His expensive suit was now creased, his usually polished shoes covered in dust from the railway tracks. For the first time in years, he didn't care how he looked. His eyes were fixed only on those two infants. The doctor beside him spoke gently. "They are very lucky, Mr. Okafor. Malnourished, yes, but no major injuries. A few more hours on that railway track and—" He didn't finish the sentence. Chinedu's jaw tightened. His mind replayed the image, the basket, the cries, the approaching train. He shuddered at how close death had been. "Keep them safe," he said, his voice quiet but commanding. "I'll cover all the expenses, whatever they need." The doctor nodded, impressed by the billionaire's sudden concern for two abandoned children. As the hours passed, police officers arrived. A tall inspector in uniform, Inspector Bala Adeyemi, entered the ward. He was a seasoned officer, his face marked with years of chasing criminals in Lagos. He shook Chinedu's hand firmly. "Sir, we heard you found them on the tracks. Is that correct?" "Yes," Chinedu replied. His voice carried authority, but also a trace of something Bala hadn't seen before: emotion. The inspector scribbled notes. "Do you have any idea who left them there?" Chinedu shook his head slowly. No. But whoever it was, I wanted them dead. Bala frowned. We will investigate. Abandonment is common, but leaving babies on a railway track, that is deliberate. Almost execution. The word sent a chill down Chinedu's spine. Later that evening, a nurse came into the ward carrying a small, crumpled cloth bag. Sir, we found this inside the basket with the babies. Chinedu's eyes narrowed. The bag was old and torn, but inside were two things: a broken beaded bracelet and a folded piece of paper with faint handwriting. Inspector Bala carefully unfolded the note. The words were shaky, written in hurried strokes. Forgive me, I had no choice. Please protect them. A. Chinedu's brows furrowed. A? Who is A? Bala looked thoughtful. We'll run this through handwriting analysis. Maybe we can trace it. Hours turned into a long night. Chinedu refused to leave the hospital, sitting in the corner of the ward as the babies slept peacefully for the first time in days. His phone buzzed constantly, missed calls from business partners, investors, even government officials, but he ignored them all. Somewhere deep inside, he knew this wasn't just a random act. Someone had wanted these babies gone, someone powerful. By morning, Bala returned with news. We've traced a maid who worked for a wealthy family in Ikoyi. Her name is Amaka Nwosu, 25 years old. She disappeared 3 nights ago. Neighbors said she had twins, but no one has seen her since. Chinedu's chest tightened. You think these are her children? It matches, Bala said. And there's more. Amaka was last seen running from men who work for Chief Obinna. The name hit Chinedu like a punch. Obinna, his old rival. The man who had tried to destroy his business empire years ago. A man known for his ruthlessness. Chinedu turned back toward the cribs. The babies stirred softly, their tiny faces calm in sleep. Innocent, helpless. If Obinna was involved, this was not just abandonment. This was murder, hidden in plain sight. And Chinedu Okafor knew one thing. He had pulled these children off the tracks. Now he would not let them or their mother be silenced. The name Chief Obinna hung heavy in the hospital room, like smoke that refused to clear. Chinedu Okafor stood motionless, his sharp eyes fixed on Inspector Bala, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. Years of ruthless boardroom battles had taught him to control his anger, but now it burned dangerously close to the surface. Are you certain? Chinedu asked, his voice low and cold. Bala nodded. Yes, sir. Witnesses saw Obinna's men chasing Amaka the night she disappeared. It seems she witnessed something she wasn't supposed to. Chinedu exhaled slowly. So it was him. Chief Obinna, once his close business associate, now his fiercest rival. A man with influence stretching from Lagos boardrooms to the darkest corners of the underworld. Their rivalry had started with a broken partnership years ago. Chinedu had chosen integrity, Obinna had chosen greed. Since then, they had crossed paths countless times, each trying to outdo the other. But this was beyond business. Chinedu's gaze shifted back to the twins lying in their cribs. Innocent, pure, their only crime was being born to a mother who had seen something Obinna wanted buried. Where is Amaka now? Chinedu asked sharply. Bala shook his head. Missing. But if Obinna is involved, her life is in grave danger. Chinedu paced the hospital floor, his expensive shoes clicking against the tiles. His mind raced, connecting pieces like a chessboard. If Obinna had forced Amaka to abandon her babies, then her silence was next on his list. Find her, Chinedu said finally, his voice commanding. Before he does. Bala nodded, but his eyes betrayed worry. Obinna is powerful, sir. His men are everywhere. Even the police tread carefully around him. Chinedu turned sharply, his expression dark. I am not the police, and I do not tread carefully. That night, as the city of Lagos buzzed with neon lights and the endless hum of traffic, Obinna sat in his lavish mansion. His thick gold rings sparkled as he raised a glass of whiskey to his lips. Around him, armed men stood guard, their faces hard and cold. One of them stepped forward. Boss, the babies survived. The CEO took them to Street Mary's. Obinna's glass froze midair. His eyes narrowed. Okafor, he muttered, venom dripping from the name. Always meddling where he does not belong. Another man asked cautiously, "Should we handle him?" Obinna leaned back in his leather chair, his wide frame filling the shadows. A cruel smile spread across his face. "No, not yet. Let him play hero. The higher he climbs, the harder the fall." He sipped his drink, his eyes gleaming with malice. "But bring me the girl, alive, before she talks." Back at the hospital, Chinedu sat in the quiet ward. The twins were asleep now, their tiny breaths steady. But his mind was far from calm. For the first time in his life, he felt something he had never allowed himself before: responsibility for lives other than his own. His phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't business. It was Bala. "We found her." Chinedu straightened instantly. "Where?" Bala's voice was urgent. "A safe house near Ajagunle, but Obinna's men are already on the move. If we don't act fast, she won't survive the night." Chinedu's jaw tightened. He looked once more at the sleeping babies. Then he reached for his jacket, his eyes cold with determination. "Then we move now," he said. For years, his battles with Obinna had been about money, power, and influence, but this time it was about something far greater. This time it was about life and justice. And Chinedu Okafor was not a man who ever backed down. The night sky over Lagos was thick with clouds, hiding the moon in darkness. The city buzzed in the distance, but in the narrow streets of Ajagunle, danger lurked in every shadow. Inspector Bala's unmarked van screeched to a halt outside a rundown safe house. Chinedu Okafor stepped out, dressed sharply even at this hour, but his eyes burned with grim determination. This wasn't a boardroom battle, this was war. Inside, a young woman sat trembling in the corner. Amaka Nwosu, barely 25, her clothes torn, her face pale with exhaustion. She clutched her knees tightly, whispering prayers under her breath. The sound of approaching footsteps made her freeze. Suddenly the door burst open, not Bala, not Chinedu Obinna's men. "Take her!" one of them barked. Amaka screamed, but before they could grab her, a second vehicle screeched outside. Chinedu stepped in, flanked by Bala and two armed officers. "Step away from her!" Bala shouted, drawing his gun. For a tense second, the room was filled with heavy breathing and the metallic click of weapons. Chinedu's eyes locked onto Amaka's terrified face. "You're safe now," he said, his voice steady. But even as he spoke, one of Obinna's men lunged. Gunfire erupted. Bullets shattered the wooden walls as Amaka ducked to the floor. Chinedu grabbed her arm, pulling her to safety behind a table. His heart raced, not from fear of bullets, he had bodyguards for that, but from the thought of what would happen if he failed. "Move! To the van!" Bala yelled. They bolted out into the night, Amaka clinging desperately to Chinedu. The van roared to life, speeding into the narrow streets. Behind them, black SUVs with tinted windows gave chase, headlights cutting through the darkness like predators' eyes. "Hold on!" Emmanuel, Chinedu's driver, shouted as he swerved hard around a corner. Tires screeched, sparks flying as metal scraped against concrete. Amaka sobbed softly in the back seat, holding her hands over her ears. Chinedu put a firm hand on her shoulder. "You'll see your children again," he said. "I promise." The SUVs gained speed, closing in. One rammed the van's rear bumper, sending it lurching forward violently. "Shoot the tires!" Bala ordered his men. Gunfire cracked again, bullets flying both ways. One SUV skidded out of control, crashing into a street pole. But two more kept coming, relentless. Chinedu's eyes narrowed. He had faced corporate predators, but this was different. This was raw survival, and he refused to lose. "Faster!" he barked at Emmanuel. The van burst onto the main expressway. Lagos city lights flashed by, the skyline glowing against the black night, but danger was still at their tail. Then, with a screech of tires, one of the SUVs pulled alongside them. A gunman leaned out of the window, aiming straight at the van. Time seemed to slow. Chinedu's instinct took over. He grabbed Amaka and shoved her down, shielding her with his own body. The gun-fired glass shattered. But before another shot could come, Bala's men returned fire. The SUV spun, flipped, and exploded in a shower of sparks and flames. Silence followed, broken only by the heavy breathing of those inside the van. Emmanuel kept driving until the city noises swallowed the chase. Finally, they slowed near a police-secured compound. Amaka was still trembling, tears streaking her dusty cheeks. She looked at Chinedu, her lips quivering. "My babies, are they?" Chinedu placed a firm hand on her shoulder, his expression softening for the first time. "They're alive. They're waiting for you." Her sobs broke into relief, and she covered her face with her hands. As Bala secured the perimeter, Chinedu stepped aside, looking out at the glowing Lagos skyline. He wasn't a man of faith, but tonight he silently thanked whatever power had given him the chance to protect those children. Yet deep in his chest, he knew one thing. This wasn't over. Obinna had declared war, and in the final battle, only one of them would walk away standing. The sun was just beginning to rise over Lagos Lagoon, casting streaks of orange across the water. At a private police compound near Victoria Island, Amaka sat in a quiet room, her hands shaking as she held the tiny fingers of her children for the first time in months. The twin babies cooed softly, their innocence untouched by the horrors surrounding them. Tears streamed down Amaka's face as she whispered, "My angels. Mama is here now." Chinedu stood at the doorway, watching. For a man who had built empires and crushed rivals, this moment hit differently. His chest tightened. The railway track, the basket, the helpless cries, they all led to this moment. But outside, danger hadn't ended. Inspector Bala stormed in. "CEO, sir, we just received intel. Obinna himself is coming. He won't stop until the woman and those twins are dead." The room fell silent. Amaka clutched her children tighter, fear flooding her eyes. Chinedu didn't flinch. He straightened his suit jacket, his voice firm. "Then we end this. Tonight. The showdown." That night, the compound was eerily quiet. Crickets chirped in the nearby bushes, but everyone knew war was about to break out. Floodlights cast long shadows across the yard. A convoy of black SUVs pulled up outside. Doors slammed, and armed men fanned out. At the center of it all, Obinna Nwankwo emerged a tall man with scarred cheeks and eyes cold as steel. He sneered when he saw Chinedu standing calmly at the gate. "So, the mighty CEO plays hero now?" Chinedu's voice was steady. "You abandoned your own blood, Obinna. That makes you weaker than any man I know." Obinna's laughter was sharp and bitter. "Those twins are nothing, just tools. The mother? A liability. You should have walked away, Chinedu, but now you die with them." Before he could signal, Bala's men opened fire. Chaos exploded. Gunshots ripped through the night. Sparks flew as bullets hit metal. The compound shook with violence as Obinna's men charged forward. Amaka, hiding inside with the twins, pressed her back against the wall, whispering prayers. The babies whimpered, sensing the terror around them. Meanwhile, outside, Chinedu fought with a ferocity no one expected from a businessman. He wasn't just protecting strangers anymore, he was fighting for something that had awakened deep inside him. At one point, Obinna lunged directly at him, knife flashing in the floodlight. They clashed, raw strength against sheer will. "You're finished," Obinna snarled, pressing the blade dangerously close. But Chinedu's eyes burned with defiance. With one final surge, he twisted Obinna's wrist and slammed him hard to the ground. Bala moved in, handcuffing the mob boss as his men scattered like rats. Breathing heavily, Chinedu looked down at Obinna. "This isn't business anymore. This is justice." The healing. Hours later, as dawn broke fully, the compound was peaceful again. The twins slept soundly in their mother's arms. Amaka approached Chinedu, her eyes swollen from crying but glowing with gratitude. "You saved us. You saved them. I can never repay this." Chinedu shook his head. "No, Amaka, they saved me. Before tonight, my life was only about power, money, and deals. But these children, they reminded me what really matters." Amaka placed her hand on his. "God sent you to us." For the first time in years, Chinedu smiled not the cold, victorious smile of a CEO, but the gentle smile of a man who had finally found purpose. Inspector Bala entered, breaking the silence. "Obinna will never see daylight again. It's over." Chinedu glanced at the twins, then back at Amaka. "No, it's just beginning. A new life for all of us." The camera would fade on the image of the twin babies sleeping peacefully, their tiny chests rising and falling, symbols of hope after a night of blood and chaos. Closing note, narration style. On a railway track in Lagos, 2 abandoned souls were found. They could have been lost forever, but fate had other plans. Sometimes, even in the darkest night, light finds its way. And in protecting the innocent, even the coldest heart can discover its true purpose.